cover crops, then there's so many different things that can be used. I know in your 12 seed blend, you have flax, clover, lentils, vetch, a whole bunch of good things. Talk to us about cover crops, the benefits, when they should be used. I know there's some debate on whether you should grow cover crops along with the plant or if it should just be in between grows. So talk to us about that stuff.
Yeah, this is really good. And this is a deep one. So I encourage people to do their own research because there's lots of great information. And some of these organic trials that are done, they have methods for 40 years. They've tested organic growing trials, no-till trials, and many of the higher producing regenerative farms, the mission is spread where these cover crop companies pop up because they're using cover crop. It's working so well, they can then sell seed to other farmers and they start to receive the benefits. And on farming, it's pretty clear. If you have bare soil, that's not how nature intends it, and that's the conventional farming style. When it comes to organic farming, one of the benefits of a cover crop when you first start doing research is there's multiples, but the basic sense is that cover crops are beneficial plants that have the ability to improve the soil quality. They do that through a number of different actions. One is they grow vigorously and they cover all of the soil and they attract beneficial insects. But on top of that, the thing I think they're most famous for is that clover is in the legume family, they actually take nitrogen out of the air and they have the ability to fix that nitrogen through its nodules on the root and a organic process and put it into the soil. And it does it through two methods. One is the cover crop can grow in soil that your normal crop may not be as good at growing in because the soil may be not improved yet. Cover crop will grow in there and it'll add organic matter. And as you till that cover crop in, it becomes what they call green manure. You are fertilizing the soil by putting freshly green grown plant that's full of carbon and it used the sun and it grew some of the nutrients from the soil and you kill it. And now what happens is you turn these minerals that were down deep, it's pulled up to the top and it's turned in organically. So now your next crop can benefit from all that fertility. And also the soil structure full of organic matter will hold water. It'll hold beneficial life. It'll hold microorganisms, worms. All of these things happen by utilizing cover crop. And in a dry climate like Colorado, cover crop fields, when done right, they'll be like a microclimate. It'll be moist underneath the cover crop. The morning dew's on there. So it's just, when you think about how nature works, it makes a ton of sense. Now, what isn't as natural is when people first started using cover crop indoors. And I think a lot of it took off because it's kind of romantic. It's this emotional feeling to see all these plants like a jungle growing around your main cash crop because it feels like you're actually farming or gardening in a real way instead of just bare soil with a plant. And when you consider that, it makes a lot of sense. But we were told for a long time, whether it's in your raised bed vegetable garden or whether it's indoors, that adding all these plants would be a problem. For one, they would say it's going to steal all the nutrients from your main plant, or it's going to attract pests or problems. I found most of these gardening worries are inexperienced gardeners having many problems, and correlation does not always equal causation. A lot of times when you know a whole system, you're able to utilize the benefits. And indoors, some of the best crops I've ever grown were when I started using cover crop. And it's hard to forget that. And I think what I relate that to, besides the fixing nitrogen, all these things, which fixing nitrogen takes a while. It may not be as big of benefit indoors, but when the plant dies, it returns nitrogen to the soil that way, even if it wasn't fixed. But it can happen, it does happen, especially when you're growing no-till and you have cover crop going forever. But the benefit that I think I experienced is some of our earlier soil recipes, they weren't as balanced because we didn't do as much soil testing and we would just throw in according to the recipes we read about. And a lot of them were heavy on extra inputs because more is better, right? And we learned that some of those excesses were actually problematic. Some of the amendments like kelp, if you doubled or tripled just because you wanted to, they brought maybe some sodium. Or if you added too much certain ingredients, maybe there's chloride or bicarbonate. And for the most part, all these recipes work, but if they get junked up and too many of the bad ones, it takes a while for the soil to leach it out and deal with it. And when you put cover crop in, all of a sudden, you don't have to be as perfect at watering, because if you overwater, the cover crop drinks it. If you underwater, you're going to know because you're going to get wilt in both the cover crop as well as the main crop. So it's more about the overwatering. It helps fix that. But it also seems to digest some of the problems in the soil. and then release them through the cover crop, which is no longer like too salty or too problematic. So it would like buffer a soil that wasn't perfect, and I'd get really healthy growth out of the plants. And for when you're living soil, I mean, that's what you want. You want a perfect leaf, not burnt tips. You're trying to put in the natural method to get the results. And so for what it's worth, the cover cropping made a huge difference. And the argument that you touched on, should we grow them with the plant or not? It's a big one, and I think that it's about technique. And so if you are, let's say you're growing a big tomato plant and you know they take lots of energy and they grow really big. Well, if you grow cover crop and you grow it 12 inches tall and then you come spread it and you put a little tomato seed, good luck. The cover crop will absolutely devour it, take it over, won't even have a chance. But typically on a farm, that's not how it works. They would till that cover crop in, they would cover it with plastic, or they would at least cover it for a week or two. That would all turn into fresh soil, then they'd go plant their crop. But for us, what we see most often is what's called living mulch, or more companion planting. It doesn't have to be cover crop, but cover crops seem to be affordable. They have a lot of the benefits we're looking for. You can also grow herbs, and you can grow some quick growing food crops as companion plants. But what I encourage you to do is, let's say that same tomato plant scenario, if you plant the tomato plant first, or if you have a transplant and then you put the cover crop in, the cover crop becomes secondary. It becomes shaded by the bigger leaves. It never really gets to take off, and it's more now in a support role where it's barely trying to stay alive underneath everything you have going on. That, to me, is the living mulch technique. That's where you get the benefit of the moisture management, the beneficial, the predators get to live underneath there. And as you chop it and drop it, and you might add some other fertilizers at some point, organic ones, they combine. And the Build a Soil way is to use like a high carbon mulch, like a straw mulch. And the browns that are the straw and the greens that are the cover crop, when they're chopped and combined together, that's the foundation of how you make compost. The browns and greens decompose into black, rich compost. And because we like worms in there and all the beneficials, it provides a home where normally that bare soil would be beat by the sun, dry, and of no beneficial use to all these organisms. So, like I said, we could talk for days about just this, but in that quick conversation, I wanted to try and really give you as many directional signs to start to research as possible.
This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrowIt15 to save on any of their products.